Good morning. I'm Heather McLean. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a member of our board of directors. Welcome to White Bear Unitarian Universalist Church. We're a community of youth, adults, and children of many diverse theologies, held together by covenant, not creed. Together we share the values of courage, reverence, and compassion. May you know deep welcome and belonging in this place. We encourage that welcome by asking everyone to wear a name tag. If you are here in the room, please take a moment to say hello to your neighbor right now. Thank you. To share a request for today's meditation, please place it in the chat box before the opening hymn or add it to our meditation bowl. Please gain consent before you use someone's full name. The meditation bowl is in the Soulwork Center, along with some activities to help people of all ages engage with today's service. Welcome visitors. We're glad that you're here. If you're interested in learning more about our church community, please consider attending a brief 12-minute intro and tour immediately after the service. Look for the person holding the sign. I believe that's Erin today, and she'll meet you right over here by the fabric wall. The tour will end in the social hall, where we're inviting all of you to engage with conversation circles. In a small group setting, you're invited to introduce yourself briefly and then share a small sparklet that you're taking with you from today's service. Please join us in this welcoming practice. This Wednesday, you're all invited to join us for supper at 5:30 p.m., followed by our all ages soul work. We'll also be hosting a parent circle and choir rehearsal. All are welcome. Mark your calendars for a few exciting opportunities over the next few months. Our pledge campaign kicks off next week, March 10th. And then on Thursday, March 21st, we'll be hosting a spring equinox service, much like our winter solstice service. There will be a potluck beforehand and a bonfire with s'mores and a sing-along afterward. Please contact Reverend Jack if you're able or willing to help. On Sunday, March 24th, we're hosting Bring Yourself Sunday. Ice cream sundaes will be provided, and Peter Mayer will be providing the music. We hope you can join us in person. We'll also be hosting a series of course charting conversations as it relates to stewardship and our desire to tend and care for this community that cares for all of us. In these small group discussions, you'll be asked to reflect on how you engage at church, what you love, and what you hope for WBUUC. Your input will help us deepen our relationships and move forward in a strengthened covenant. These conversations are happening on Thursday, March 14th, Wednesday, March 20th, and Sunday, March 24th. We hope that many of you can join us for these sessions. Please check the e-news for more info, and you can sign up on the WBUUC website. And now a special word from Reverend Jack.
I'm so happy to welcome the Reverend Jen Crow into our pulpit today. Jen serves as senior minister at the First Universalist Church of Minneapolis. She is the founder of Wellspring, a Unitarian Universalist program of spiritual deepening used across the country. And she's also the author of the book, Take What You Need, Life Lessons After Losing Everything. Her commitment to recovery, spirituality, transformative love, and authenticity is at the center of her life and work. A graduate of Smith College and Meadville Lombard Theological School, she lives with her wife and two amazing kids in Minneapolis. It is quite a privilege for me to be introducing Jen this morning. The first time I was ever in a UU church, Jen was actually the one preaching the sermon. I often tell the story of this experience, so many of you have heard it before, but I have to give a quick recap. It was profoundly healing and transformative as a queer young person to hear a sermon from an out queer minister about the radical welcome and acceptance of UU churches. She went on to explain in her sermon that UU churches celebrate the whole spectrum of diverse sexual relationships between consenting adults. And I had never heard that while sitting in a pew before. It was profound. I knew my very first Sunday there that I was accepted and celebrated as the queer Buddhist-leaning agnostic that I was, and Jen was a big part of that welcome. My own pathway to seminary started shortly afterward. And the story goes back from there. Jen herself actually let me know this week that our former settled lead minister, Victoria Safford, was her minister when she came into UUism in Northampton, Massachusetts as a young adult. Jen was also here with us this fall, along with David Pyle from the regional office, to help with our ministerial startup retreat. Some of you were here for that. Along with Unity Church Unitarian in St. Paul, our churches are intentionally building connection between our congregations for at least the last year and a half, really intentionally. Last year, we had a joint training with UUA staff on right relations teams. This winter, we hosted a joint workshop, a training with Reverend Dr. Carissa Cooley about transforming conflict. And this morning, our three churches are engaging in a pulpit swap. So Reverend Jessica is at Unity, Reverend Kathleen is at First Universalist, and we have Jen. This pulpit swap is one more visible sign of the deeper connections we're forming, not just between our ministers, but between our congregations. We are in this together, caring for and supporting each other intentionally. Jen, we're so glad you're here again. Thanks for being with us today.
So ends our announcements. Welcome to our church. Together, we grow our souls and serve the world in love.
Come in. Come into this place which we make holy by our presence. Come in with all your vulnerabilities and strengths, fears and anxieties, loves and hopes. For here you need not hide, nor pretend, nor be anything other than who you are and who you are called to be. Come into this place where we can touch and be touched, heal and be healed, forgive and be forgiven. Come into this place where the ordinary is sanctified, the human is celebrated, the compassionate is expected. Come into this place. Together we make it a holy place. I'm Reverend Jack, and my pronouns are he, him.
I'm Kathy McComber, and my pronouns are she, her. On one summer day a long time ago, in a little house in the North Woods, my spouse and I lived with our 3 busy, very active little boys, ages 3, 4, and 7. One day I discovered I had only 1 cookie left in the jar. I called Michael, the youngest, over for the treat. When you're the youngest in a family, sometimes you don't get the special attention the older ones received at that age. The first child is the focus of all your attention. In our household with the second, there was still 1-to-1 adult and child. But by the third, we were outnumbered, and at times it was love and crowd control. I always tried to be intentional about making time and space for Mike to be the special one for a little while. I told him, this is the last cookie, so just eat it here and don't tell your brothers. You know that would have resulted in the chorus of, I want a cookie. That's not fair, give me a piece. Most toddlers would have gobbled it right down. Instead, he ran to his brothers, broke the cookie into 3 pieces, and shared the treat. I was stunned and humbled. For a little one to think immediately of sharing with his brothers who may not have had the same impulse in his shoes. He took no time to weigh his options. Another child might have given in to immediate gratification, but then again, maybe that's what he did. For him, sharing with his brothers brought immediate gratification. 3 boys, 3 pieces of cookie. At the time, this event literally brought tears to my eyes. Selfless giving. This image has never left me. This memory lets me lean into uncertainty, the unexpected, the possibility of learning a simple and powerful lesson. Today, we light the chalice for leaning into generosity, sharing love and serenity, security and joy, time and treasure.
My name is Amy, and my pronouns are she, her. Will you please join me in the opening words? Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Please rise in body or spirit for our opening hymn, number 347 in your gray hymnal, Gather the Spirit. I'd like to invite those young and young at heart forward for a story this morning. You can come join me right up here on the floor if you'd like. And if you would rather stay in your seat, that's okay too. I just invite you to take a breath and just settle in where you've landed this morning. It's good to see you all. So, as your Director of Religious Education, there are many, many things that I really, really love about my job. I get to learn about you all, the children, youth, and their grown-ups of this congregation. I get to work alongside a lot of really fun staff and volunteers in our congregation who help make the work of this church happen. And when I see you all on Wednesday evenings and on Sunday mornings, I get to hear a lot about what's happening in your lives. I get to see your lost teeth. I get to hear about the things that are happening in school. And sometimes you share with me too some of the hard stuff that you all are holding to. But one of my very favorite things about this job is that I get to watch church just happen between you all. And what I mean by watching church happen is that church can be kind of hard sometimes, right? When we are at church, we are actually learning about how to build communities rooted in love and how to grow and serve together. We build covenants. Does that sound familiar? Sound like something we do together? Yeah, we build covenants, and then we try to help one another live into those promises. And sometimes this work happens in more organized ways, like our circles, our spiritual growth circles, or like right here in the worship service on Sunday morning. But often, it happens all on its own. And I call this church in the wild. Sometimes you all just get together and you play and you talk and you do the work of this church, and you have to figure out how to do this in the most loving way possible. And so I have a story with you about this, a real life story that happened once upon a time right here in this church, right across the hall in the social hall about 4-ish years ago. It was a Sunday afternoon, and 2 young friends had been playing together in the social hall, as they often did. I had observed these 2 playing together often, almost every single Sunday, and they were good friends. And so it surprised me on this particular day to see them seated at a table with their grown-ups surrounding them, looking rather serious. I observed them as they sat around the table together for quite some time, and there was worry, and there was sadness, and a little exhaustion on their faces. Can you make that face? What does that face look like? Yeah, a very serious face. And they held this face as they sort of talked with one another for a long time. You see, there had been a disagreement. And so I joined the table because naturally I was a little curious, and the situation became clear. Each had felt hurt by the other. Has this ever happened to you with your friends before? Yeah, how about you all? Yeah. So even through their, and of course, neither of them had intended to hurt the other. It kind of happens sometimes. And so even through their sadness and frustration, I could hear them sharing from their own experiences and listening, trying to understand the other one. It was a master class for all of us up here. These kids were phenomenal. Conversations like this can be long and tedious, and yet they stayed at the table together. They took time for each other. They were doing the hard work of building community in love. But even despite their new understandings of one another and the apologies that had been shared, hurt had happened, and even the most unintended of hurts can be really, really hard to hold. And so we talked together about how challenging it can be to be a good friend, how much we all wish we could be perfect friends all of the time, but we're just not. But what we're left with is to do our best and to be loving and understanding and patient and kind, and to be in covenant. These are things that we struggle with our whole lives, and maybe you all can back me up on that. Yeah? Sometimes I said, I wish I had superpowers that could help me to be a better friend. If you could have one superpower, I asked, to help you with these struggles, what would it be? We wondered together about this for a moment until one of the kiddos answered, who I think was about 8 years old at the time. They said, I wish I could go back in time and fix my mistakes. Can you all relate to this? Yeah. I thought this was very wise. So I nodded. There were many times when I had messed up that I wish that I could go back in time and just wave a magic wand and fix it. The other kiddo answered, who was about 10 at the time, I wish I could just walk away and feel at peace. Well, this blew me away because, of course, this shouldn't have, because I know you all are just really, really wise, right? This resonated with me. A wish not to be able to erase anything, all of the hard stuff, all the good stuff, all the fun stuff, or the everything in between stuff of friendship, but to just feel a sense of peace with it all. Let's take a deep breath and feel that sense of peace. But there were already several superpowers at that table that day. There was listening with an open heart, there was kindness and love and patience, and so, so much more. Of course, it wasn't more than a moment later that these 2 were up and playing again, as is the way that friendships sometimes go, playing and learning and growing together, joy and sadness together, holding our imperfections, and ultimately shining together. These are our superpowers, and this is the work of our church together, and this is the work that we're all going to do, maybe in the wild today, but also in a more organized way in our circles in just a moment. Thank you all for listening. We're going to sing our children, youth, and facilitators on their way to their classes, to their circles. Number 1057, Go Lift It Up. I invite you to rise in body or spirit.
Please join me for a moment of meditation or prayer. As we gather in this space with about 120 people here in the room and 30 households attending on Zoom, let's take a moment to pause. Take in what's happening around you, and then shift your gaze inward to yourself. Close your eyes if that's comfortable. How is it with your spirit today? Just notice. You don't have to do anything about it, just notice it. This morning we give thanks for the gifts that bless and enrich our lives, including the gifts of our beloved colleague, Jen Crow, and the connection we're beginning to feel with our fellow UU churches right here in the Twin Cities. We also make space this morning to hold all those near and far, perhaps including ourselves, who are suffering physical and mental dis-ease, addiction, isolation, poverty, war, and oppression. We make space for all the suffering that has happened near and far during these past 4 years as we mark the onset of the pandemic, including the shutdown of this physical space nearly 4 years ago. I invite you to especially hold in your heart the people affected by the current wars and genocides happening on our beloved planet. We pray especially for people who are being targeted and attacked because of their identity as trans and non-binary folks, especially youth and children, and other marginalized identities. We take a breath together, a breath of peace and a breath of loving kindness. In this breath, we remember that the very life force of the universe, of the multiverse, is within us, animating and sustaining us. It's in our bodies, swirling in our minds, and in our spirits. We breathe deeply of this spirit of life. This morning we hold in light and in love Josh Irish and his friend Linda, who he's visiting this weekend as she nears the end of her life. We have requests here for Pam B. and family, another friend lost to addiction and suicide. For a dear friend who is waiting to have a biopsy, may he feel peace and experience any healing that is needed. And a request for someone's niece, Molly. She is a young mother with 3 children under 3. Doctors found a brain mass this week, and she's waiting for a biopsy. Please hold her in the light. And out of this silence and into it, I invite you now to speak in your hearts or out loud the names of the beloveds that you are particularly holding today. Knowing that we are more able to hold these together than we can alone. Amen. Please remain seated for meditation on breathing. There are 3 parts and you can choose whichever one you'd like. We'll sing it through a few times.
This is the moment in the service when we practice gratitude and support in the form of giving to our offering plate. The gifts collected today will go to support the mission of this congregation, to grow our souls and serve the world. There are a couple of ways you can give today. You can use the text to give feature, the numbers in your order of service. You can give on the website, or you can place cash or a check in the offertory basket. Thank you for your generosity and your faith in this life that we live together. The offering will now be gratefully collected.
Our first reading is If Bell Hooks Wrote 1 Corinthians by Tess Baumberger. Love is caring, affectionate, and loyal. It knows and respects the other. Love is committed and trusting. Love takes the risk of loving. Love is never hurtful, abusive, or neglectful. It does not coerce or dominate. Neither does it spoil or overindulge. Love is ethical, accountable, and responsible. Love does not lie to avoid conflict or manipulate. Love does not lie to trick or deceive. Love is open and honest, but with a positive slant. Love lives with integrity that wills cooperation. Though it is satisfying to love, love is not about getting one's needs met, nor solely about meeting the other's needs. True love is made of mutuality. Love is a generous giver, and in giving, it learns to receive. Love places another's interest on the same footing as our own. Love is not so much a feeling as an action. A continuing active choice to nurture another's well-being. There can be no love without justice and equality. Therefore, love requires that we subvert patriarchy, white supremacy, consumerism, ableism, anti-queerness, and all other forms of oppression.
Our second reading comes from the poet Aurora Levins Morales. Aurora is a writer and an artist, a historian, teacher and mentor, an activist and revolutionary. She's also a Puerto Rican elder who lives with chronic illness and disability. And she wrote this poem after the events of October 7th. It's titled Summons. Last night, I dreamed 10,000 grandmothers from the 1,200 corners of the earth walked out into the gap, one breath deep, between the bullet and the flesh, between the bomb and the family. They told me we cannot wait for governments. There are no peacekeepers boarding planes. There are no leaders who dare to say every life is precious, so it will have to be us. They said we will cup our hands around each heart. We will sing the earth's song, the song of water, a song so beautiful that vengeance will turn to weeping. The mourners will embrace and grief replace every impulse toward harm. 10,000 is not enough, they said. So we have sent this dream like a flock of doves into the sleep of the world. Wake up, put on your shoes. You who are reading this, I am bringing bandages and a bag of scented guavas from my trees. I think I remember the tune. Meet me at the corner. Let's go. It's so good to be here with all of you today. And thank you for the moments that are worship for me, which are the music and the chance to breathe and just be together. It's wonderful to be here. You know, it is so important to know that we are not alone, to know that we have each other. Whether that's the congregations across the Twin Cities, maybe it's us in this room or joining us online, the friendships and relationships and the love that holds us when times are good and times are hard. It is encouraging to be together. Now, Reverend Jack said earlier, we have been intentional about creating these relationships between the three larger congregations in the Twin Cities metro over the last couple of years. And I remember stories from way back from my mentors who said this is the way it was 20 years ago or 30 years ago, this cooperation and mutual support, and we are working to bring that back. We know, and I think all of us know from our individual lives and collective lives, having been through some of the most intense parts of the COVID pandemic and of really the political life in our country over the last many years, that we need each other. That isolation is not the answer, that it is in fact damaging to us and our hearts, and we need relationships and we need to tend them with one another. So we're doing that. We're doing that together, and I hope that you're doing it in your own lives, in your own ways as well. This has been a time in congregations and in schools and communities all over where conflict is on the rise. Maybe you've experienced this. I hear it from my kids at school. I hear it at workplaces and families. Over the last few years, it's been hard. And so it is important to reroot ourselves in love, in what guides us in our thoughts and actions, in our words and deeds. Love that can, in fact, guide us through the good times and the hard times. Now, you can probably already tell from the readings that I picked that I think it really matters how we define love. I'm not too interested in just falling back on the old ways, but on looking to some of the newer interpretations that I find more helpful. So I turn often to bell hooks. Bell hooks is an author and a theorist and a social critic, and she has some amazing writings on race and feminism and class, but it's her writings on love that have really grounded me in. So what does love mean? Let's take a look at this together. This is what Bell Hooks says. She takes M. Scott Peck's definition of love, which echoes the work of Erich Fromm, and Peck defines love as the will to extend oneself for the purpose of nurturing one's own or another's spiritual growth. Love is as love does, she says. Love isn't a noun, it's an action verb. Love is an act of will. Namely, it is both an intention and an action. And it also implies choice. We do not have to love. It's not something that just happens to us. We choose to love. Now, according to Bell Hooks, love requires us to mix a whole bunch of different things together. Yes, there is affection there, recognition and care, but there's also commitment and trust and honest and open communication. When love is about the nurturance of our own and another's spiritual growth, it's clear that love does not include things like abuse or harm. Love is an action word. It's something we do, not just something we feel. Now, I can imagine that many of you have heard those verses of 1 Corinthians. They're fairly popular biblical verses that are often used in weddings, and they're the ones that say things like, love is patient, love is kind, love isn't envious or arrogant or boastful or rude. Love is not irritable. I have to say that's not me. I mean, sometimes. Love keeps no record of wrongs. I wish that was me all the time. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. That's the familiar kind of interpretation and translation. And these words can be beautiful and inspiring, and they are in many ways, but they can also be manipulated to cause harm. And they can be manipulated to be weaponized, really, to teach us that love requires us to endure all things and accept all behaviors, which is not what love is. Certainly, if we are going to be subverting patriarchy and racism and oppression in all of its forms, we are not going to be enduring all things. We're going to set some limits about what's okay and what isn't. I think it's helpful to know, too, that these words from 1 Corinthians are so often taken out of context. They're often now translated and used as if they were meant to be for couples, for two individuals in an intimate relationship. But actually, these words were written as the foundation of what love could mean in a church setting. This was about what love could look like in community, not just between two individuals. So let me go back to Bell Hooks's imagined interpretation of 1 Corinthians. Love is ethical, accountable, and responsible. Love is never hurtful, abusive, or neglectful. True love is made of mutuality. Love is a generous giver, and in giving, it learns to receive. And I love this one. Love places another interests on equal footing or on the same footing as our own. It's a continuing, active choice to nurture another's well-being. It matters so much what we mean when we say the word love. When we say love is the spirit of this church, when we sing love will guide us, when we say that we are going to be guided, as you say here, I know this from your mission and vision, we can see it, that together we grow our souls and serve the world, guided by love and reason and conscience. It matters how we define that word, love. It is so very important. Many of us probably know that the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. talked about love as a powerful transforming force in the world, a power that could be great enough to ground us in the experience of beloved community, a kind of love that could change oppressors into friends, reconciliation, repair, justice in our actions and in our laws. Love like this could bring goodwill, that could bring us out of the deep gloom that we experience and into an exuberant gladness of a new age. This is a powerful kind of love he is talking about. But this love that can ground and build beloved community, it has to be more than an ideal, more than a feeling. It has to be a practice of how we are together. I like to say that this kind of love is not about some obscure and hopeful thing. It is about what we are doing and saying and how we are being right now with ourselves and in relationship with each other. Dr. King also said this. We can look together. Dr. King said that our goal to create a beloved community, our goal is to create this beloved community, and this will require a qualitative change in our souls as well as a quantitative change in our lives. This means that not only do our hearts and spirits need to make a turn, but a quantitative change. How we are accountable in our relationships, what love actually means when we put it into practice in our lives. Back to that love as an action word, love as a set of practices. So, love is as love does is the simple way I like to bring this back. And I have a friend who used to get in trouble in a lot of different work situations, and she would come talk to me about it, and we found one common denominator to all these troubling situations she'd find herself in, and it was that she would begin the conversation like this. Let me tell you something about yourself that you don't know about yourself. And shockingly, people didn't like that. They didn't want to hear. So I'm going to take a different tack. I'm going to say, let me tell you something about yourself I hope you already know about yourself, that I know about you as a congregation and as a people. You are people who put love into action. You know these definitions, whether you know them intellectually, you know them in your hearts. I've been watching you all for years now live into love. Live into this kind of love that is ethical and responsible and accountable. love that happens in relationships. You are a congregation full of health and strength and vitality. You are a place full of joy and curiosity. You are a place that matters in this community, both right here and in your lives, but in the larger Unitarian Universalist community as well. I've been watching as you've been joining with my congregation and with Unity in learning about covenants and right relationships, as you have been learning about how to transform conflict into something healthy and generative. I have seen you put love into action here over and over again. And it's been a lot, I'm sure. All of our congregations have been through a ton of change since 2020, but you all have in particular. Not just changes in staffing and the COVID pandemic, which would have been enough for anyone. But I'm aware as one of the colleagues too, that just a few weeks ago, this congregation went through something really difficult too. Some of you are probably here and you're gonna know exactly what I'm talking about, and others of you might be new today, and this is new information. Whatever relationship you are to this event, that is okay. But a member of your congregation who had been in conflict with several ministers over several years came into the service on a Sunday morning and attempted to disrupt worship. Now, I know that your leaders and everyone here handled this well, handled it with love and care. I know that you have been leaning into that bell hooks definition of what love is for some time, that love is ethical and accountable and responsible, that love at times requires us to set and hold boundaries that help ensure a place and a space and a relationship can truly be a place where we can nurture our own and another's spiritual growth. You know the hard truth that in our congregations we welcome all people, but that doesn't mean we welcome all behaviors. This is hard to hold sometimes. And I know that this moment in the life of this congregation was an important one and a hard one. For some folks, this was a traumatic experience. For this community, it was a big deal. There are folks I know who don't feel safe being in the building now. I know that your leaders, your paid leaders and your volunteer leaders are spending countless hours and all kinds of discernment listening for where love is calling them next. I know they are handling innumerable important details about how to hold the space, how to welcome in ways that hold boundaries, ways to live into the covenant that you share together. Not to mention the vortex that happens of time and energy and money whenever we get entangled with our legal and justice systems. It is exhausting. I know you know this. So what I want to ask about and talk about today is, what does love look like right now in this community, in your lives, in your relationships? What is love asking of you right now? I'm going to tell you a quick story and share a couple ideas and leave you with that question. Now, it was several years ago now that my family and I experienced a house fire. It was a bolt of lightning, middle of the night. Thank goodness all of us got out okay, most important part, but we lost all of our possessions pretty much. And one of the things that I found quickly after that is that people had a lot of opinions they wanted to share with me about the experience that I was having. These opinions were not all super helpful, I have to say, and it's a good lesson for me of how to just extend care and listening instead of inserting my own thoughts necessarily. Here are some of the opinions that I received. If your house was just shorter, if only you'd had a lightning rod. Maybe if your house was taller, maybe you moved into the wrong house to begin with. Maybe if you weren't a queer Unitarian Universalist minister, lightning wouldn't have hit your house. Not helpful. So I started reading. Maybe there'd be something helpful online. Probably not, right? Should have known better. But it's the middle of the night and I'm awake, so there I am. Here's the advice from important government agencies. Make sure that you keep all your important documents, even the ones you use every day, like your license or maybe your passport, your checkbook, insurance policies, put them all in a tiny fireproof safe. And in that tiny fireproof safe, also put a list of every single belonging you have, when you bought it, and how much it was worth. If you have the receipts, put those in there too. And then, if you have a fire, grab that tiny fireproof safe on the way out the door. What? This is completely ridiculous. And it helped because it became so clear, right? This is ridiculous. Other people who are watching my experience are trying to find some way to control it, to be able to say, this will never happen to me, I'll do it better, I'll be more prepared, or you should have been more prepared. But here's the thing, right? We cannot prepare for everything. We can't. Not with like a perfect flow chart and spreadsheets and all of that stuff. That is not, in fact, how we prepare for those hard times. We prepare by being in relationship with one another. We prepare for life by being in relationship with each other. I've started to say to myself and to others, being ready means being in relationship. That's what it is. Mark Hicks, who's a theologian, describes universalism like this. He says, universalism is a love that will not let us go, will not let us down, and will not let us off the hook. This kind of love and relationships, that's what I'm talking about. Relationships that won't let us go, relationships that won't let us down or that apologize and make amends when they do, relationships that won't let us off the hook. That's the kind of ready I'm talking about. This ready happens in hundreds of conversations over coffee. It happens when we are with each other online or in person, when we sing with one another, when we breathe in the same space, when we share the ups and downs of our lives. This ready happens in all of those small moments. And conflict, I hate to say it because I hate it, I'm learning. Conflict is a normal part of what happens in relationship. It's normal to have to negotiate boundaries and reset them and clarify them together. It's normal for there to be hurt feelings like we heard about with the kids, and then to do our part to remedy that and make amends and listen. We are going to have to get excellent at conflict if we're going to be excellent at being in relationship with one another. This is a skill we need. But so often when hard things happen in relationships, whether that's one-on-one or in a community, people back off. They back away because it is understandably uncomfortable. And there are moments where for some of us with particular lived experiences and identities, where backing off is exactly the right thing. But there are times for others of us, or maybe it changes for each of us all the time, when actually what we need to do is move in when hard things are happening, instead of moving away. It was a couple of years ago that my kids came home, and I can't remember which one of them or what was going on, but there was something happening in one of their schools where they had been talking more and more about what to do when someone is being bullied in the classroom or the hallway. And they had gone through this whole curriculum that was awesome and that I don't remember the details of, but I remember the phrase of it. And they said it was about learning to go from passive bystander to active ally. How do we, when hard things are happening, when someone is being hurt or harmed, how do we go from, instead of being the person that's like, ooh, I'm so glad that's not happening to me, I'm gonna walk away, to the person that finds a way to distract, disrupt, name it directly, offer support, go find someone who can help? How do we become that person and move from passive bystander to active ally? To me, I hear this and I think this is what love is asking of us when we can. To move from passive bystander to active ally. To extend ourselves. To nurture one another's and our own spiritual growth. How can we do that? What does that look like? Adrienne Marie Brown, an author and activist, says in her book, "We Will Not Cancel Us," she says this quote we can see together. She says, in these times, we need to flood the entire system. Flood the entire system with life-affirming principles and practices, to clear the channels between us of the toxicity of supremacy, to heal from the harms of a legacy of devaluing some lives and needs in order to indulge in others. We need to flood the system with life-affirming principles and practices. Clear the channels between us of the toxicity of supremacy. This is our work. This is what love is calling us to. It takes different shapes for each of us in different moments, different relationships. But I invite you to wonder, what would that look like here in this community? To flood the system with life-affirming principles and practices. What would it look like right here, right now? Showing up in the ways that you can for yourselves and each other. I'll close today reminding us of the words of the poet Aurora Levens Morales. She reminds us it has to be us. It'll have to be us here in this congregation, in our relationships, in our world. It will have to be all of us, cupping our hands around each heart. It is us. We will sing the earth's song, the song of water, a song so beautiful that vengeance will turn to weeping. The mourners will embrace, and grief will replace every impulse toward harm. We have to send a flock of doves out into the world. Wake up, she tells us. Wake up, put on your shoes. You who are reading this, you who are hearing this, she says, I am bringing bandages and a bag of scented guavas from my trees. I think I remember the tune. Meet me at the corner. Let's go. May it be so. Amen. I invite you to rise in body or spirit and join in singing together. Love will guide us.
Join me in the closing words. May peace dwell within our hearts and love with journeying in our minds. May love steal our will and love of truth forever guide us.